Hello and welcome to AXSChat. This week I'm delighted that we're joined by Mei Yee Man Oram from Arup. Arup are a large architectural firm, and Mei Yee is responsible for the accessibility element of their work, which of course we think is extremely important. So Mei, can you tell us a bit about the work that you do, how you came to be working in this field, and you know, on what it is and what it means for Arup to be accessible?
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for inviting me to join you to talk about this. So the team is called Access and Inclusive Environments. What we do as a team is specialize in inclusive design, as you mentioned, Neil, and typically what that involves is working with both internally within Arup, with our colleagues, with the architects, the designers, and the engineers within the company, and also with external clients as well, to make sure that what we're designing is accessible and inclusive, both from a physical perspective, but also in terms of how people actually experience space, how people, whether or not that experience is actually equitable, and whether or not that quality is equitable across different user groups. In terms of, so you were asking about how I got involved in this field.
Yeah.
So I started off studying architecture at university. As part of that, I was looking at sort of architectural history as well, and thinking, and as part of my dissertation, thinking about how architecture has been used historically to separate people, segregate people. And so as part of my dissertation, I was sort of very interested in, the history behind that. And when I left university, I was sort of like, well, actually, how can we reverse that? How can we use architecture and the built environment to actually use that as a tool of for integrating people and getting people to understand each other more, to get people to participate, and to integrate communities. So when I finished university, I really wasn't aware of the fact that inclusive design existed as a career path. Happened to come across Arup, and the rest is history. Never left.
Okay, and I'm from a family of town planners, so I'm also interested in this stuff. I grew up around people thinking about how do we bring people together, what are the mechanics of communities, and so on. So architecture is more than just about buildings, right? And Arup is absolutely engaged in thinking about the larger scale. Yes, as an architecture firm, you've done some iconic buildings around the world, but this is your practice is about, particularly, and we met talking about city design and stuff like that. So what do you think are the really key ingredients in an inclusive city? And then I know Debra's got some questions we'd like to sort of follow up afterwards.
Yep. So I think that's a really great question. I think one of the so we recently completed a study with there's a charity in the UK called Sustrans who look at trying to encourage people to walk and cycle more. And so there's a 2-year study that we recently completed and launched over the summer, which I think summarizes that sort of my answer to that question, really. So I think, as you mentioned, Neil, it's about the sort of infrastructure and the built environment, how that can support people in their cities and in their spaces to actually participate and to feel involved and feel a sense of belonging. But in addition to that as well, it's about the support and the people, and also about the governance as well and the representation. And if we're able to look at that together holistically, to make sure that actually, so using the study as an example, it was looking at how we can make cycling as an activity more inclusive. for communities who are currently underrepresented in that cycling community. And so I think one of the things, again, is that we through user group consultations that we discovered through this is that people didn't feel through the media representation that actually cycling was an activity for them that was suitable for them, because of the infrastructure. It wasn't able to accommodate different types of equipment that people might need, and because of the way that people have designed that space and the people that are involved in designing that space as well, it didn't reflect that diversity.
Yeah. I know I promised Deborah that I would let her speak.
But if you want to follow up,
cycling, and yeah, I was in my Twitter feed this week, and I was seeing a lot of tweets from people who are in the disability space and also working in transport, and we've implemented these sort of priority cycling lanes recently, but they've also said that they should be used by wheelchair users and other people, and the wheelchair using people in my stream are saying this is a nightmare. So how do we resolve those kind of challenges where we have well-meaning intent, but we're not really, consulting the community when we're implementing these kind of projects?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Neil. So I think, in the UK, I think there was, like you say, good intentions in terms of trying to get cycle lanes up, trying to get people to be more active, especially under the current COVID situation as well, so that people are able to access fresh air, access exercise, and maintain social distance. So there've been lots of things that are happening sort of in my local area, elsewhere across the UK, and probably elsewhere across the globe as well. But I think in the urgency to try and get that to get those things implemented and to get people out and support that activity. I think there was a huge oversight in terms of actually not consulting people and not consulting enough people as well in order to really capture that diversity across different sectors of our society. So I think, as you said, Neil, consultation and getting people involved in that discussion is absolutely critical.
And I think more and more we're realizing that, we're hearing that mistake made over and over and over and over again in every conversation. We're not getting the right people into the conversations so that we can make sure that we're creating things that are accessible. But I wanted to sort of go back to something that you said, Mei, and we really, really are grateful for your work, because people like you are actually going to change the world. And so this is, we really want to support efforts like yours. But you said that when you were in school, this wasn't really brought up. But I know that here in the United States, we just celebrate, I'm not going to politics. We just celebrated our Americans with Disabilities Act for 30 years. And so, we've been trying to teach architects to include us for a really long time, but it still is an afterthought. So I know one former Paralympic, and she's actually in Texas, but she works mainly in Latin America, that is building accessible buildings and homes and smart cities. And I know of a woman in Once, Maria, that does amazing work. And then I know about you, and I'm sure there are others, but I'm fascinated why you weren't taught in school, but thrilled that you have figured it out and then got a wonderful company that supports you in the work you do. What can we do to make sure, other architects understand the value of actually, building something that works for all people?
So I think part of it might be when I went to school. So I'm not going to reveal how old I am, but I think part of it is the fact that it just wasn't on the curriculum when I was at university, when I was studying sort of architecture in the built environment. I think there are efforts to introduce that. So as an example, it's, you know, there's now in terms of the Royal Institute of British Architects, the RIBA sort of curriculum, there is a inclusive design arm or branch to that now. So I think there are efforts, but I think as you said, very often in practice there is still the tendency to leave it, I suppose, until it's too late, or you know, not thinking about inclusive design early enough. And there's one example, or there's a couple of things I suppose that I think are important to raise here. So as part of the ADA over in America, as part of the building regulations in the UK, I think it's important to you know, to acknowledge the fact that actually the data that kind of builds up those recommendations in those guidance documents are that you know, they're averages. That's data that has tried to find an average amongst a very, very diverse set of communities. So anyone who's an outlier to that still doesn't work. Even if we're compliant with the ADA, even if we're compliant with building regulations, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. You know, there's still so much more that we can do. And just going back to the comment that I made earlier about that diversity within our teams as well, and how we actually approach solutions. There's an example that that I think anyone who knows me has heard me sort of use way too much. But there was a case probably about a few years ago now, where there was a company who manufactured and designed a automatic water dispenser tap. And when they launched it, what they had not appreciated was the fact that the automatic sensor didn't recognize particular skin tones. So if complete oversight from their side, not intentional, I'm sure, but I think again that really goes back to Neil's point about the fact that, you know, as well as consulting and actually speaking to people and making sure that you capture that diversity in how you're testing your products, testing your environments, it's also really important to make sure that people within your teams as well internally that you've captured that diversity.
I agree. And I'd forgotten to mention Tia, who is somebody that we had on the show not long ago. There is brilliant people in the field, but it just seems like it is an opportunity to be more innovative. And I know architects like to be innovative. I know there's this world-renowned architect in the United States that's blind, and some of the architecture that he's built, it's just stunning and so accessible and so creative. And the thing, of course, that we all know is the more accessible we make it, the more usable it is for everybody. So it's, and I know that you had mentioned before we went on air that, you know, you're also very focused on sustainability and making sure that the buildings that you build and, you know, the cities that you build, that they're taking care of our planet as well. And Neil actually has talked about that not being accessible is like pollution. So I'm fascinated with leaders like you and your company that understand the value of making sure it works for all of us innovatively, and at the same time protects our planet at the same time. So I think that's very exciting. But I am still very discouraged that we are not talking about this more meaningfully in education. And I would love to see leaders like you going in and teaching classes, because that's what we need to see. We need the leaders that are doing it, actually teaching the younger architects and the older architects how to do this. So I want to applaud you. And I know Antonio has a question, so I will turn it over to you, Mei, to comment, and then also turn it over to Antonio.
Thank you for joining us, Mei. It's I've been in some of your buildings in the past, and I know how good design can work, and not also for people to access the building, but also to create a good environment between the employees that work in a certain space. So lately, and I'm sure this came across you, where there's a lot of conversations about creating cities more sustainable. So every event, that every conference, virtual or not, that talks about cities puts a lot of emphasis on sustainability. And sometimes associated with sustainability comes a connection with technology. And that's what we see. But how can we, when you are engaging with your customers or potential customers, how do you engage? Okay, that's really important. It is, but it's also important to make them accessible and inclusive for individuals, because we are talking about huge investments. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we are talking about public money. And how can we make sure that we look at accessibility from the beginning of the planning to make sure that in the end, everyone gets a good outcome?
Yeah. Again, really, really great question there. I think one of the things that we're definitely noticing more of in terms of some of the clients that we're working with is, like you say, that focus on technology and the desire for their buildings to be smart. And I think one of the things that we're always conscious of, and the discussion that we have with our clients is that regardless of what technology is put in, if we were to strip all of the technology out as a building, as a space, it should still work. People shouldn't have to rely on the technology for it to be usable, and for that experience to be equitable. So in relation to in relation to sort of the work that we do, the technology is always there as a enhancement to, not as a replacement to what we're actually trying to provide and what we're trying to achieve within those spaces.
I'm going to jump in since nobody else did. Are you finding that your clients are starting to ask for it? Because I just think, the reality is when we are business owners or we're in, corporations, we have to do what our clients tell us, and we can encourage them and, oh, well, do you want to, but are the clients asking for it more? Are y'all feeling more confident to be able to say, by the way, as we're doing this design, even if they didn't ask, here's an opportunity to do this. And also, by the way, it makes it more accessible to everyone. So it seems like there's a push and a pull there, but I'm assuming that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there are different types of clients that we work with. There are the ones which, because there's that need to comply with legislation, with regulations, it's a case of, can you help us to make sure that we've done what we have to do? We've got other clients that are very forward thinking, where they're saying, actually, we want the best for the people that are using our buildings, whether that's staff, whether that's visitors, whether, whoever that might be. So we've got those attitudes which are very, very positive, and they really want to do the right thing. And then we've got the people that are sort of in between, that we try to kind of push towards that direction. So again, I think, whoever it is that we're working with, there's always that conversation that we have with them to try and make them understand, I suppose, like you say, what the benefits are, why it's important, and we can tackle that from different ways. There's the sort of social responsibility, and the fact that actually we should be doing it as responsible employers, as responsible service providers. There's the business case to it as well. If it's more accessible, then actually you're going to attract more people to your premises, whether it's again, people visiting, if it's a public building, whether it's a more diverse workforce because of the fact that your office building is much more inclusive. So there's different ways that we can approach it depending on what the client's objectives are, but yeah.
We have seen some interesting observations in relation to designing a 15-minute neighborhood. So here in Cork, there was some discussions about how can we enable that in the city. So, of course, when you are building in cycle lanes, it's something that you are able to achieve, or easier in some places because of the geography of the city itself. It could be an older or a newer city. But how do you see we making this possible also for people with disabilities? How can we design a 15-minute city that is also inclusive and allows people to benefit from it?
Yeah. So I think that kind of brings us back to the comment that we had earlier from Neil's comment about consultation, about making sure that we really understand who the communities are, because what might be appropriate for a city centre in London might not be appropriate for the city centre over in Cork or over in the somewhere in the States, or so we need to understand who those communities are, what the cultural sort of context of that is, and again what then is appropriate for trying to adjust and to incorporate more inclusive features within that built space.
Right. I sort of tangentially going on from that. So we've talked quite a bit now about these sort of civic spaces, but our cities are also made up of housing stock. And when we look at our aging population and the housing stock that we have, we don't tend to build stuff that is adaptable and that can change with us and adapt to our needs over time. And we had Anna from the Centre for Aging Better on AXSChat a while back, and she talked about the need for us to be thinking much more deeply about building housing stock that we can stay in, that we can live in, and we don't end up with young people in houses of multiple occupancy, because all of the large houses are stuck with single people in. We have opportunities in, obviously we're building new cities and new housing areas, and there's an opportunity there. What sort of work are you, Arup, doing in the space of housing design, and what are some of the constraints? Because I know from my own personal experience, you go to these large new estates, there doesn't seem to be that much in the way of actual intentional design there. There's just this sort of cookie cutter template of fairly sort of cheap boxy bricks with some small windows in. So what can we do, and what are you doing in this area? Because I think it's a really important area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's something which, we've spoke about before, Neil, in terms of, allowing, if we're able to design housing stock in a way which accommodates all life stages, then actually there's much more flexibility there. We can start to be more adaptable to some of the things, some of the items that you mentioned there, and I think it's a big challenge. I think, as you say, in terms of what's actually designed out there. I was having a conversation with a colleague probably a couple of weeks ago now, but the fact that, again, using the UK building regulations as an example, there's certain space standards, but actually if you looked at the first, the top 3 wheelchair providers in the UK, the turning circles that those wheelchairs, those most popular models of wheelchairs, actually use in comparison to the space standards that are actually being provided as a minimum standard in the UK, there's a disparity between those two. So I think there's huge issues that we need to sort of address, and I think, unfortunately, it shouldn't be the case, but I think the building codes probably are where that's probably where the starting point is. I think a lot of the time, unless it's regulated, people just don't pay attention. So I think, in my opinion, I think that's probably where we need to start making that change. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that building codes give us that very baseline. I think there's also a mismatch between people thinking that they've met building codes and therefore are accessible. So I think there's some education to be done on that still.
Absolutely.
The other area we talked about before is going back to technology, and that is actually, how do you plan to design for technology that is slow to move and embedded long term, where when technology trends are moving at a hugely rapid rate. So, when you build a building, that the technology that you put in is not going to be refitted again for maybe 10, 15, 20 years. So what are the differences in considerations in implementing tech in architecture compared to sort of implementing tech as a technologist in a technology firm like the one I work for?
So I think in terms of the approach that we take as a firm, I'm going to shout out to a couple of other teams that have far more far more expertise in this. But we've got a foresight team that kind of looks at those future trends, that starts to think about, as you say, what we're looking at if we're considering a building with a 50-year, 100-year lifespan, and thinking about what sort of things we need to think about at this point when we're designing things that can accommodate that flexibility and accommodate those, that ease of adaptation to meet those future needs. We've got other teams sort of within the company that kind of specialize in smart technologies, and again, sort of lining all of that together to really understand, where society, where buildings, where that's all going, will help to build in that adaptability. We've got a few buildings or a few projects at the moment where, again, that desire to have smart buildings, to have that technology built in, is a really key focus for the client. And again, for us, then it's a case of understanding, what it is that they're wanting to achieve in the immediate term, understanding where those trends are heading as well, and then making sure that the infrastructure is built in to be able to accommodate any of those scenarios.
Excellent. I think that's so important, because you don't want to be building immediate obsolescence. Because the technology is moving so fast that it's very difficult to, from the taking it from the drawing board through the planning process to building this stuff. It takes years. So that thought to be able to build in the flexibility, I think, is really key. Our time has gone really way too quickly. Half an hour's already whizzed by. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, and also thank Barclays Access, MyClearText and Microlink for keeping us on air and supporting us to get the message out there about accessibility and inclusion. And really look forward to you joining us on Twitter. Your handle is @ArupAccessible.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Excellent. We will see you on Tuesday. It's been a real pleasure, May. Thank you very much for joining us.
And I just want to say thank you to May, and go Biden, go Harris. We are taking our country back. That's right. The United States is going to elect President Biden to the White House. Woohoo!
Oh,
woohoo! Sorry. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. So was that you're pleased with your QAnon conspiracy theories?
I know. I got to go eat some babies, but whatever we do. But
okay, so
Thank you, Mei. Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Thank
for
you
your
to
leadership.
you all.
We really appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate even more that you're a woman leader. So thank you so much.